Welcome to another edition of Who's Better Baseball, the podcast. We talk about what's simple in this world. Who's better at baseball? We got the trade deadline coming up a little over 5 weeks away. And so we're going to talk today about some teams that are most interesting to watch until that deadline. We're going to do a little draft where we're going to go back and forth so we can spotlight individual teams that we should really take notice of right now. Patrick, before we get into our draft, what are you most excited about just in the game right now coming up here? What has caught your eye over the weekend? Any standout players, teams, things that really jumped out to you?
Well, I'm getting ready for the draft. I think that's a big thing that I'm buzzing about. We got the College World Series final tonight, Texas A&M against Tennessee. So a lot of the young guys, a lot of the young players that are making their impact in the game. That's kind of what I'm excited about. And yeah, the topic that we're going to discuss today is the trade deadline, because we're at that time right now where teams that are going to be aggressive, they're going to start making those moves now, over a month in advance of the July 30th trade deadline. So, baseball is heating up. The temperatures are getting there too. And so is the trade deadline stuff. How about you? What are you excited about? And I know you're going to say the Mets because they've been very good. They've been very good.
I don't want to spoil my draft board on what we're going to do here. I don't know if that's a team that I may or may not want to talk about later, considering, they've won 15 of their last 21 games. And of course, I could be really hot about some sticky substance rules today after Edwin Diaz got the boot in yesterday's game. I'm going to get suspended here. But overall, I just think right now this is that time of year that baseball fans really get into it. I think some of the casuals that might not have been on board for the first couple of months, now they can start to see, there's been some real sizable amount of games played. The All-Star games coming up. So you're looking at who have been the top players in the league, and then the deadline, which is becoming more and more each year, like the pinnacle of the baseball season is the trade deadline. What's going to happen? Who's going to sell? Who's going to buy? People are so interested in prospects these days. So which teams are going to take advantage? There's just a ton to discuss, which brings us into our draft for the day, because this is sort of there's a lot of nuance to the teams that we're talking about here, because we could just flatly be saying these are the teams we believe in, or maybe these are just the teams we're most interested in. It's kind of just a branching off point to talk about some of these teams that are caught somewhere in the middle. And Patrick, I'm going to give you the honor of the first pick here. So which team do you want to draft or talk about right now that is the most interesting to watch heading into this trade deadline?
I'd love to be a spoiler and totally ruin your draft board, but the team that's got me really excited right now is the Minnesota Twins in the AL Central. They're ahead of the Kansas City Royals right now. Royce Lewis is hitting a home run just about every other game, doing it at an insane pace. And we love our central teams here on Who's Better Baseball. It seems like I didn't know that we were going to love them, but we do. And Minnesota's been fantastic. They've been a great story. It's a beautiful ballpark up there at Target Field. And in a year in which, there's so many teams on the coast getting coverage with big time players and superstars that they've acquired in the offseason, Minnesota has done it really quietly, especially with one of the more underrated pitchers in the game, and Pablo Lopez, who they've extended through at least the 2027 season. So for me, the Minnesota Twins are very much a club right now. I believe they're second in the AL wildcard rankings right now, that I really think is going to be, aggressive going into that July 30th trade deadline, and really is going to make a move for the AL Central to have at least 2 postseason teams this October.
It's crazy to look at the standings and see they've passed up the Royals. Now, the Royals got swept over the weekend against the Rangers, but you look at this Twins team, and because of those early season injuries, I think a lot of us started to write them off a little bit. Now, like you mentioned, Royce Lewis is back. Carlos Correa is having a great season so far this year. He's been very solid. And I look at the F4 leaders on the team, and you count them up. There are 8 guys who have been worth at least 1 win so far this year. And you have Edouard Julien, who's at 0.9. So if you almost have an entire starting lineup of guys that have been just net positives, that's going to bode really well for you. It's a team that we don't really know how aggressive they will choose to be. We don't know how aggressive any of these teams in the Central will choose to be. But as much as we think that the Guardians are kind of the head and shoulders best team in this division, the Twins were supposed to be the favorite coming in, and they're starting to play like it.
They really are. They're getting contributions from everybody, as you pointed out, and they're not a young team anymore, right? They've got those veteran guys. They've got plenty of players that are close to 30, and despite the fact that Carlos Correa, as you pointed out, playing really well, but Correa, Byron Buxton, and Pablo Lopez signed together through at least the 2027 season. Those are three of their cornerstone pieces. But there's a lot more that are going to be free agents. Max Kepler is going to be free agent at the end of this year. They've got about $50 million coming off the books in general, if you look at their projected payroll for 2025. So I think it's going to allow them to be a little bit more aggressive and say, well, you know what, we've got a group that's gonna stay together for a while, but you know what, we're losing some critical pieces here too. So we might need to go out and add. And I think the pitching staff is that spot where they're going to look to make certain additions because they're doing it really well on offense, as you pointed out. And they're 7-3 in their last 10, and they're just trending in the right direction. And I think they're going to go out and do some things because they're paying some big bucks to a guy like Carlos Correa. Same thing with Buxton, who you don't know if he's going to be healthy next year. You have those opportunities in the upcoming seasons, but if he's not healthy, that's a big piece that you're going to be missing. Well, that piece is in play right now. You might as well go after it. Maybe even go after the AL Central in general too, because that's no guarantee, as we know, in the American League. So whether it's the AL Central or just locking up one of these postseasons in the American League and trying to make a run in October, I think the Twins are going to be aggressive this summer.
They have so many variables that just are so erratic when you look at Buxton, Correa, and Lewis. But just sheer talent, that trio, you get that trio healthy in any postseason series, and they can make some things happen. You're right. The pitching is a big thing that has to be addressed. And I think part of this period right now is, if you're the manager, if you're in that clubhouse, you're talking about you really have to show yourself to this front office that this is a team that is worth buying into, because pitching's not going to come cheap at this deadline. Everyone needs pitching at this time of year. You look at this rotation, you have Pablo Lopez, like you mentioned, whose underlying stats are far better than his 5.11 ERA.
So he's going to get better. That's a positive for you, is that your
Yes.
ace has not been good. 5.11 ERA.
But yeah, but then you look at the expected ERA of 3.25. Yes, you're going to get more from him. You've gotten great stuff from Joe Ryan. His expected stuff sort of lines up to it. 92 innings, 15 starts, 3.13 ERA. Simeon Woods Richardson has been great for them. A young starter starting to establish himself. He's got a 3.26. You look at Bailey Ober. I think he just had a Greg Maggs the other day where he pitched, was a complete game shutout or something with 89 pitches. So I don't know if you're bumping him. Chris Paddock is a guy that they hoped a lot. They hope they get a lot of him. It hasn't really been there. So they have, 5 names right now, but getting another guy to put next to Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan atop that rotation would go a long way. I just don't know who that guy is at this year's deadline.
And I think if you can get that number 5 starting pitcher, who really you're ultimately going to want him to slide in at like the number 2-3 spot as far as abilities go, Chris Paddock in a bullpen, that really could move the needle in such a big way. And again, I appreciate you giving some shine to a guy like Simeon Woods Richardson, former Mets prospect. So I know you're kind of quietly rooting for him in a way, or rooting against him. No, you've proven to be the kind of guy where you want players to do well, regardless if it does not bode well for your team in the Mets. So Minnesota is really an exciting team, and as long as Royce Lewis can stay healthy, as long as Byron Buxton can stay healthy, I'm not worried about Pablo Lopez. As you said, he's kind of been unlucky in many ways. He's going to be fine. I think Joe Ryan is legitimate. This is a team. Yohan Duran in the bullpen, one of the best closers in the game. You're talking about a team that could really make an impact during the postseason, and you really got to fortify that spot to separate yourself in the second half from those other AL clubs and really secure one of the wild card spots. So again, Minnesota to be aggressive here this summer.
Yeah, I think if you compare them to the Royals right now, the Royals have a clear need to address their bullpen, and we'll see if they do that. But I think there might be a sense of urgency that's, even though the Royals added and were aggressive and are said to be still in that mode of really trying to win now, it's easier for them, I think, to sit on their hands a little bit and say, if they don't perform over the final month here, to say, we'll just sort of ride with what we have. We have good pitching. We have good talent. Whereas the Twins, I feel like there's more of a clock on this window. And so I agree with you that the Twins are a more interesting team to follow out of that Central right now. And the Guardians are just far and away ahead. I'm going to make my pick here. I'm going to make my first pick on a team to watch. I'm not going to go with the Mets just yet. We'll save them. We'll see if you want to steal them from me. I want to talk about the Boston Red Sox because to me, the Red Sox are this team that no one was expecting to be in the race, and they just are staying there, and they sneakily have this really good core that's forming from Jarren Duran to Wilyer Abreu to all these guys. Tanner Houck now looks like a legitimate Cy Young candidate, a guy that you could ride in a postseason run potentially. And I think even though John Henry has not committed much to this team, to a lot of the fans' ire, if this team goes out over the next month and they keep doing it, at some point, will they push some of the chips forward and add to this roster because they can make a run this year and they have a farm system to do it. So the Boston Red Sox are a team I'm really interested in because I think they will take any excuse possible not to push the chips in, but this is a roster to start believing in that might force the front office's hand here and force really the ownership's hand.
Yeah, when you're doing it like this in a major city like Boston, you're going to be expected to continue. Now, attendance has not been great. It's up a little bit from this time last year, but in general, you'd think that the Red Sox would be getting more than 31,000. But the Celtics made a run, obviously, in the NBA Finals. So again, you've got the NBA over. Game 7 of the NHL Stanley Cup Finals is tonight. Another reason why baseball is really coming into form right now. So, will the city support these guys maybe a little bit better? Will that communicate that to the front office, as you pointed out, and new GM Craig Breslow, who really wasn't counting on this being the year. So I don't think we're going to see major chips go in. It might be more of a quantity of prospects rather than the quality. Obviously, Marcelo Mayer you're getting rid of your top prospect at shortstop there. But Boston, I very much could see, being aggressive and saying, hey, you know what, we might be able to do something here because they might not like their prospects going forward. They might not necessarily like the fact that a lot of these young guys having a career year and really could be the start of something positive going forward. You don't know if they're going to be healthy next season. That's the biggest piece is these young starters, when they ratchet up those innings from one year to the next, even if it's of top quality, that third year, they might break down. And so you kind of have to go after it in that way, even if it is just for show, right? Even if you're not going after the best players at the trade deadline, but you are adding some pieces where you need that. Anybody in the bullpen, which every club could make that addition. They don't need a starter, so that's going to help them. And again, if they can plug in somewhat of a platoon hitter, whether it's an outfield or otherwise, a bat, a reliever, that's going to look good, and that really could help your chances in making the postseason.
The crazy thing about the Red Sox is you look at. Like I was trying to think in my head, all right, like what could they do? And it's a crazy trade, but let me just throw this out there to you. What if you were to call up the White Sox and you just were trying to get some fresh blood to help things? You trade for Eric Fetty just to get another starter potentially. You could always transition one of your guys into the bullpen. Like Nick Pivetta has done really well in the bullpen in the past. You get Michael Kopech to give you like another like potential arm in that bullpen that you're not going to have to pay a Mason Miller or a Ryan Helsley price tag on. And then you pick up a Paul DeYoung or a Tommy Pham. You just get another, like if you just got some guys in here, I feel like a couple more just major league pieces would take this team to another level. You look at this lineup and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys with a WRC plus of 126 or better. That's including Tristan Casas, who has not played much this year. Hopefully they get him back soon. But it's a sneaky good lineup. And do you know what Rob Refschneider's doing? Just one quick aside there.
The South Korean-born Rob Refschneider? I do not know.
He's hitting .322 this year with a .402 on base percentage. That's unbelievable. Like the performance they've gotten. It's a fun team to watch. It really is.
He's become Brock Holt 2.0, I think, in a lot of ways, in that
Yeah.
utility role. So, yeah, look, when the pieces are there and your players are performing, you have to reward them. And as long as Boston is staying in that hunt, I think that's an important message to send when you are a new general manager, when you have a new front office like that. Is sure, we've got a plan in place, and we don't really want to deviate from that very much. But you got to reward the players if they're getting it done. You can't turn your nose up at an opportunity to have some October play, and they've been struggling for that in the last couple of seasons. So if these guys are going hard, and the starting rotation is continuing to put up the numbers as they've been, and there's no reason to think that they're not going to continue, they have to be aggressive and add some pieces. Like you said, just veteran guys that it's not going to cost that much to get them. You may have to pay more than you were expecting if there's another team that's going out there, but it doesn't even have to be flashy. Again, just two veteran, competent players, a bat and a relief pitcher, and you're going to feel really good about your odds in August and September.
Especially when you look at the American League East right now. And on the other side of things, I think we can make an argument for the Rays and the Blue Jays even for maybe folding up shop when they get to the deadline and selling some pieces, because it just might not be their year. I don't think anyone expected going to this season that the Red Sox would be the third best team in this division, but they have so far. And I hope they get rewarded for that. That's why I'm really excited to watch them, because I just do not know what to expect from that front office and that ownership group anymore. I don't know if they'll be in on it. I mean, they could just say, oh, we got a good team. Let's just keep it. And that's it. And you know what? That might just be enough. And who knows? Maybe that's a win. If you're in that Red Sox clubhouse, maybe it's just a win to say, hey, we get Tyler O'Neill for the rest of this season. But it's a team that is making us take some notice right now.
And I like what you mentioned about Tampa Bay, because if they're out of the hunt and they don't figure out things, they're going to be okay. They're going to find those right pieces next year and adjust. But the longer that Tampa Bay struggles, that bodes well for Boston. And then Toronto, they thought maybe that they had the magic bullet in Orelvis Martinez, and it turns out some of his magic might have been PED induced, right? Suspended for 80 games. So now all of a sudden, the quick fix or maybe some kind of solution. You lose Kevin Biggio to the Dodgers, right? And tweaking that 40-man roster. So now all of a sudden, Toronto has less of an opportunity, less of a window to be perfect and get going and correct their season. Now maybe they become sellers. All of that bodes really well for the Boston Red Sox.
It does. It's interesting how we go into a season thinking, pretty clearly, okay, well, we know some things about the league. We know the Red Sox aren't going to be in it. We know these other teams are. Oh, Lucas Giolito went down. They have no pitching. Nobody had on their bingo card Tanner Houck being potentially the All-Star game starter. No one expected it, but that's the beauty of a baseball season. Narratives evolve rapidly, and the Red Sox are a team that things have definitely changed on. Who's your next team to look at here? Who do you like?
Well, I already grabbed my favorite team in the Minnesota Twins to be aggressive at the trade deadline. And again, I'd love to mess your board up and take them next, but I am going to the National League, and this one's an easy one. This one probably should have just been my number one overall pick, but it's pretty easy because their owner, Bob Nutting, said it straight up. We need to be aggressive at this trade deadline. The Pittsburgh Pirates, Bob Nutting came out and say, look, we've got the pitching right now, obviously with Jared Jones and Paul Skeens, but Ben Cherington, the GM, he's got the flexibility, quote, to look across a broader range of alternatives and options, but also a timeline in which it makes sense to strike. So he's going out there and saying that, you know what, this very much could be their year. There's a lot of excitement at PNC Park because of Paul Skeens, because of these young players. They've got a really strong farm system right now. If you believe in Nick Gonzalez at second base, well, now you've got a top 100 prospect and a Tamar Johnson that you can go and trade. Or maybe you call him up and you are trading a Nick Gonzalez. So the Pirates, I think, have a lot of flexibility right now to go out and be another one of those central clubs that can sneak into an NL wildcard spot. We don't typically see the central clubs being that aggressive, but this is just one of those years where we have so much compression in the middle of the pack for those teams that, could possibly be there with 3 wild cards. It makes everybody that much more relevant. And Pittsburgh's been playing well after that great start and then bad turnaround. Now they're doing it once again. And, this fan base is really hard up to be relevant again. And no one's been more relevant right now than Paul Skeens of the Pirates. So Bob Nutting said it. So I've got to kind of believe that they are going to be aggressive at the trade deadline.
It's when you have the pitching, you always have that window. And I think the interesting thing about the Pirates is how they're managing these two guys in Skeens and Jones to have them in October. But if they're looking at these guys as horses they can still ride, and they are protecting them, whether, as you've seen, Jared Jones at times he goes out, has 60 pitches for a given start, and they're trying to taper him off a little bit. If you assume that they have them for the whole season, this is absolutely a team that should be going all in. Here's my question to you, Patrick. Who's the best, not pitcher, who's the best position player on the Pittsburgh Pirates right now?
I would say, if not Bobby Bonilla, Andrew McCutchen, and I'm only looking out because he came back to the team. They were just in Colorado pretty recently, and yeah, the lineup has some pop. Brian Reynolds is really that guy for them. Started in the All-Star game in Colorado in 2021. I believe our guy Kevin Henry just wrote up a little something about Brian Reynolds just being this underrated player who's really consistent. I think the San Francisco Giants would love to have that Andrew McCutchen trade back. That's who they gave up, was Brian Reynolds in that deal. So I think Brian Reynolds is that guy. He's not a player you're fearing in the middle of that lineup. And that's where they need thump, right? They haven't gotten much out of Rowdy Tellez, which I think it makes it that much easier for them to go out and grab a bopper at first base, because there are plenty of those around. And even if they're not of, a serious name recognition, there are always those guys who can hit, that can play first base. That's a first base DH type. So I think there's someone on any number of teams out there that's not a Pittsburgh Pirate yet that is their best hitter. Whoever they go out and acquire will probably immediately become the best offensive player on the Pittsburgh Pirates. But right now it's Brian Reynolds, and that definitely does not strike fear in the heart of a lot of pitchers.
Yeah, I think that's the issue, is finding that big bat. Who's going to trade at this deadline the piece that would take the Pirates over the top? A couple fun names that just crossed my mind. I doubt it would ever happen, but can you just imagine a world where they could get Vladdy for this year and next year? I mean, that would be everything to them. That would be the perfect guy that you could slide in, starting first baseman, best hitter on your team immediately. I don't know what the Blue Jays are going to deal him, but man, that would be fun. The other guy that just crosses is, okay, here's someone that will be traded that has some thump, although he's not going to really, he could be your best hitter, but you're not going to look at him as an immediate upgrade on that department from Brian Reynolds. Would be Jazz Chisholm, as just, you can stick him anywhere in the outfield if you wanted to. You can put him back at second base. That's another name. The problem with this deadline, and it's something that we'll continue to talk about until we get there, it's just the lack of options that are on the market. But even if you can plug in Tommy Pham to this team, it makes you better. It's not the best hitter on your team, but it gets you closer. I think even if that's the move they're making, they should be trying to make some of those moves to get some pieces in here.
Yeah, and bringing in a veteran to take some of the weight off of those young players. Like, again, when the Pirates came to town in Denver, everyone was asking everyone about Paul Skeens, and people wanted to know. And Paul Skeens had his own presser with like 30 people in the Denver media there. So there's a definite scrum. And as the summer continues to heat up and the Pirates are still in that mix, those guys are going to be feeling it. And if they're not already feeling it physically, they're going to be feeling those mental aspects of the game too. And who better than to support those young players, but the veterans, right? To take some of the load off of them, take some attention away, be the guy that stands up and talks with the media. They have a couple of those guys already. They already have a really quality veteran staff. So, players that can shield the young guys like an O'Neal Cruz, they're going to be really valuable to a club like the Pirates. And maybe it's a catch-22. It would be interesting to be a fly on the wall in Ben Cherington's office, in Derek Shelton's office, and say, would you want Paul Skeens to be in the 2024 MLB All-Star game? Would you want him to represent the National League? And I think most of the baseball world would probably say yes. But if you're a Pirates fan, well, maybe not a Pirates fan. Pirates fans would probably say yes. But if you're a Pirates diehard and you're thinking about October and you're in the Pirates front office, you might say no to that, wouldn't you?
Yeah. It's tough. These decisions that they have to make right now, because it's so jumbled. That's the thing. It is so hard to differentiate between all these different teams and to really buy into having a chance. Any team has a good week or good 2 weeks, and they can vault themselves up. Any team has a bad 2 weeks, they fall back down. I don't know. I don't know if, to me, I still look at this Pirates team, and ultimately I think they're a year away. I really think it's still a year away. But when you have the owner coming out the way he has, it makes you think about it. It makes you ponder. It makes you say, all right, maybe they're just trying to catch lightning in a bottle, and it's not the worst thing when you have guys that can be this dominant in a short series.
Yeah, he's only had 8 starts for Paul Skeens, but tied for 20th most Fangraphs wins above replacement at 1.5. So he's right there. We got 3 weeks until the All-Star game, 2 until they announce it. Will it be enough to move the needle? But for everything that we've been saying about how exciting a guy like Elly De La Cruz is, and you got to find a spot for him in the All-Star game. And if he's not on the team, he could still be in the home run derby. There's only one way to see someone like Paul Skeens. It would only be an inning of work. And look, we've talked about this already on the show. We all want primetime television to see Mason Miller against Shohei Ohtani. What better than Paul Skeens against Aaron Judge? Let's make that happen.
That would be pretty electric. It would be. I mean, I don't know. It's like you said, it's got to be a decision made by those powers that be, and it's not a vote. But if you want to get eyeballs, it's a way to go for sure. Absolutely.
It is. All right. So you need your second pick, and the Mets are still on the board. I mean, I honestly, for me, I don't know if they will be aggressive. So it'll be curious to see if you do take them in this draft.
I might as well jump on it now. Look, the New York Mets are one of the most fascinating teams to watch because it could go either way. I mean, I think they have a very clear 2025 timeline that has been at the forefront. They built a team that could be ignitable and could make a run this year, but also a team that could be sold. A lot of sort of buy low, high reward type guys like Luis Severino who have actually paid off for them. But here's the thing. I look at the National League wildcard race right now, and I do not see any team outside of the Braves that I look at and I think on paper has as much star potential and talent as the Mets, because they're a team that, let's not forget, a couple of years ago won 101 games. And once you see the top 4 of this lineup of Lindor, Nimmo, JD Martinez, and Pete Alonso all hitting at the same time, it looks like the best offense in baseball, because that's what it's been in the last couple of weeks. So I'm buying into what's happened, which is 15 wins in the last 21 games. They've gone up against some good teams, and they've come out victorious in a lot of these different series, 4 series in a row that they've won, and they still don't even have Kodai Senga back. They have a chance to get better internally. So yeah, I think this is a Mets team that is shown to be pretty motivated right now. It has a light schedule coming up. I am all in on this Mets team. Of course I am. I'm a Mets fan, but what's your perspective on it?
Wow. Okay. So I'm surprised maybe a little bit that you're going in on that, because as you said, the plan is 2025 and beyond, and this changes that plan a little bit. Obviously, I don't think we're going to see the Mets give up any of their top prospects, Jet Williams, Luis Acuna Jr. Like that's not Junior, Luis Angel Acuna. They're not going to trade those guys. But really, where the math becomes funny is they're supposed to be trading some of these veterans, like a JD Martinez, to further improve that farm system. So standing pat would even kind of take them away from their plan. So to be aggressive would really be interesting. Again, you can't pass up those opportunities, because on paper, they were better in 2023 than 2024, and they were irrelevant. So you do have to go after it when you have that chance. And so I think that's really interesting. You look at some of the teams that are ahead of them, at least right now on June 24th in the standings, and the Nationals aren't going to be terribly aggressive. They may try to add some of those more veteran pieces. Also, even if they are close to the third wild card, they're at a spot right now in their rebuild where they can get away with trading those players and just kind of tapping out, right? Those guys on the 1-year deal, the Gallo, the Winker, etc. They can do that, whereas the Mets can't. And the Diamondbacks, they're waiting for a ton of guys to get back. The Giants, who've really fallen apart, losers of 5 in a row, they've got a lot of guys that are coming back. So they can sit still and feel good that, you know what, in the second half, our trade acquisitions are guys that are already on our 40-man roster. They're just on the IL, 15, 10, or 60-day IL. Whereas the Mets, other than Kodai Senga, they're going to have to go out and get that. So you know what, Ryan, you've sold me. I've sold me as well that they are going to be aggressive to really take this opportunity, especially with the Nats breathing down their neck. And maybe the Nationals end up being the better club in 2025. But right now, the Mets have that opportunity. So they might as well take advantage of that.
I think the Mets are in this position too, where, I think being aggressive, like you said, it's almost not even being aggressive. It's more a matter of holding and avoiding the temptation of cashing in on some of these pieces. Luis Severino yesterday, Sunday Night Baseball, 6 scoreless, allowed 3 singles, hit a batter, did not walk any, struck out 10. He looked unbelievable. And everyone in the baseball world tunes into Sunday Night Baseball. It's the only game on. And so if they were to dangle him, I mean, Luis Severino, I could make an argument that he would be the best pitcher moved at this deadline if Garrett Crochet is not, because we just don't know. I mean, it might be him and Jack Flaherty, 2 guys who signed very similar deals that could be moved as rentals, and Flaherty looking more likely to be dealt because of the team situation. Holding on to that piece, that's you're giving up on the chance potentially to cash in on a top 100 prospect for a guy that's a rental. At the same time, maybe you want to re-sign Luis Severino. So I think it's just how much are you buying into your team. There's the Pete Alonso trade piece. There's JD Martinez. What I actually think could happen here is the Mets could do a little bit of selling and maybe some reshaping. Here's just some names to watch out for. Jeff McNeil has been awful. Don't be surprised if it is a salaries dump at this deadline to clear him out of the roster and then do something else at second base, whether that's making a trade, whether that's going internal. They've been playing with Brett Beatty at second. There's some options, but I think doing something there, you could see trading guys like Jose Quintana and Sean Manaea that are then replaced in the rotation by Kodai Senga and their top prospect, Christian Scott. Like, the Mets have a lot of depth right now. So I could see them utilizing that at this deadline to kind of reshape. But I honestly don't see the position that they need to buy at. Their rotation has a ton of arms. I don't see them doing much in the bullpen. It's kind of second base. It's second base and maybe an outfield spot. So it's a weird team that you're just watching to see if they hold. I think that's where we're at. It's just, are they going to hold or are they going to sell?
And it could be a case where David Stearns, knowing very well that money is one of the best assets that they have to trade, they could go and acquire a veteran, almost another team's Jeff McNeil, right? And say, no, you don't have to throw in a single dollar, but include this prospect. So now maybe a change in scenery. Maybe the analytics department is saying, we know what adjustments this guy makes. In turn, there could be another team out there that says, well, we know what adjustments Jeff McNeil needs to make. So you go ahead and trade him to us, throw in some money, and allows you to get prospects that way too. So using, the finances as an asset, it could allow the Mets to swap out players, right? Get rid of some guys, bring in prospects, and also acquire some veteran guys and get prospects from teams that are looking to dump a little bit of money. Now that would be somewhat of a rarity, and that requires at least 2 trades right there to do something like that. But if anyone can pull it off right now, and anyone that has the capital to just be sending out contracts and sending out money and then also taking on bad money, it's the New York Mets.
They were very creative at last year's deadline as a seller by using their money. And I think it's to now have a better creative problem solver in David Stearns to make those decisions with these resources. I don't know if it's at this deadline, but I'd imagine at some point over the next 3 years, you're going to see the Mets make a couple trades where you're going to step back and be like, whoa, where they're going to be able to utilize their money just like they did last year. I mean, I don't want to knock Billy Upler too much. He did a great job getting. You're going to look back at that Justin Verlander trade from last year, and it's going to look very good for the Mets with the prospects they got back in Drew Gilbert and Ryan Clifford. And I think it's enticing to do that type of thing again. You could even see if the Mets went to the seller position, like eating Starling Marte's money and trading him when he's on a good year. Like there's a lot that they can do. But yeah, it's going to be, they're just a team that can do so many different things at this deadline that I find them very interesting. Also, if you want to listen to a show that takes place literally every single day, I mean, I even do Saturdays and Sundays now. Locked On Mets, check that out. Yeah, it's a it's a pretty decent show. We do pretty well over there. Always something to talk about. Let's get to your final team here. Who else are you interested in ahead of this deadline?
Well, I already took 2 teams from the Central. So that means I'm going to go to the Central again and go with the St. Louis Cardinals. They are relevant once again. They are hanging around there at the second wild card, a game and a half up from the 4th best wild card team. They've won 3 in a row, winners of 7 of their last 10. They've got a negative run differential, but yet Ollie Marmol kind of pushing the right buttons. But I think one of the biggest reasons why the Cardinals are going to be aggressive at the July 30th trade deadline is this is their time. I don't think the Cardinals have a very bright future, but 2024 is all right. You don't know how much longer Goldschmidt is going to be, the player that he's been, and we've already seen that he's not been that player in 2024. Arenado has taken another step back this season, and Mason Wynn has already graduated as one of their top prospects. So, there's not too many left. Tink Hence, Tekoa Roby, two right-handed pitchers. Again, hands off of those players. So it's going to be everyone else that they're going to go ahead and add. They've got an aging starting rotation. So now is really going to be that time for them to do it. I don't necessarily know that they're scared of some of those younger teams that are in the NL Central, kind of, bypassing them. If they're just looking at their roster going forward, you have to think that they are going to believe that this could be their best shot at it. So you might as well want to add a few more pieces to try to make 2024 a resurgence back to the postseason.
You look at a team in the Cardinals that has been lately rising up into those wild card standings. They're one of the few that has a winning record right now, but there's just something about them that I don't buy. And then I'm following them, vaguely, and I'm seeing them rise. And I'm like, all right, Goldschmidt's probably hitting. He's not hitting. Arenado is probably hitting. He's not. Now they're getting good performance from Alec Burleson, Brendan Donovan, Ivan Herrera, Mason Wynn. It's these new guys, and some guys that have been there for a little bit but aren't the established names. I just wonder, can they actually make a run this year without Arenado and Goldschmidt snapping back into form? It's not something. It's almost like, yes, they should be aggressive and maybe they add an arm or maybe they get a bat and they do make some moves, but it feels like the move that takes them and turns them into a contender is just their 2 superstars being superstars. And are they all of a sudden washed? I mean, I know 2022, I guess, is a lifetime ago, but remember, they were MVPs. Both of them had an MVP caliber season, and Goldschmidt won it. And now, what are they 2 years later? It's fascinating to see guys with that type of name value, star power, just consistently having bad numbers throughout this season.
St. Louis feels like more of an old school mold if you're putting teams in different categories, right? They're not one of those analytical darlings like the Tampa Bay Rays, or even now you could probably throw in the Milwaukee Brewers in that mix to some degree. So they're just old fashioned where, hey, we've got guys, we believe in them. Here's our opportunity. We might as well go for it. Even if you mix that in with some of the analytics and saying, well, the farm system's a little thin. We haven't gotten the production out of a guy like Jordan Walker, who, after last spring training in 2023, you're looking like this is going to be another superstar. That hasn't worked out. Matthew Liberatore, that really hasn't worked out. Mason Wynn he's been really good, but for the most part, they haven't gotten the next all-stars to step up. Nolan Gorman. So the fact that they are here at this point in time and having one of the wild card spots, sitting in one of those positions, they really just have to make the most of that and just say, well, look, our time is now, because we can't necessarily see it in the future. We'll deal with the future later on. Even if we were to try to trade an Arenado or something like that, St. Louis, that's just not one of their moves. And even if they were to do that, how much is that going to help them be a quality team going forward to get rid of a couple pieces here and there? It might not. There's a reason why they signed those 3 veteran guys, and Lance Lynn, Sonny Gray, and Kyle
Kyle
Gibson.
Gibson. There you
There
go.
you
You
go.
got it.
Because they're going after it, right? Even before they sign them, you go, this team just looks like they're lacking. And even after they sign those 3 starting pitchers, they still look like they're lacking. I feel like that's an indication enough that the front office, the brass in St. Louis, are recognizing that whether or not the team is going to do it, they're going to put their eggs in that basket for 2024.
Yeah, it just comes down to what can you buy, and I don't know. For some reason I see Eric Fetty on like 15 teams, but Eric Fetty makes sense to me on the Cardinals as it's just a half measure. I'd like to see them not make a half measure and go all the way in somewhere, like be the team that stands out and tries to make a big swing. But I don't know. The wild card race in the National League is an absolute marvel. And I don't think any team is going to know what they're going to do until 2 days before the deadline. And it could go any which way. And there might just be a bunch of teams scrambling, trying to figure it out. And the deadline just passes and no one does anything. Sell or buy. But the Cardinals, the Pirates, the Mets, these are all teams that are in that race that are trying to differentiate yourself. And a piece or two can really take you there.
The best way to describe it, as you said, wild, right? Normally, there's a team that's the wild card. That's wild. That's going to run havoc in the postseason. But this year, what's wild is the race to get one of those 3 spots.
Yeah, it's going to come down to the wire. And it's, one of the things I think we're going to be watching for is, can a team really differentiate themselves and attach themselves closer to the Braves than the scrum, or is the scrum going to be what it is throughout the rest of the season? And it's 2 spots. Are we going to be final week of the season, 7 teams at 500 or within 2 games of it, one way or the other, where literally anything can happen? It would make for a thrilling finish, or it would make us have to dust off all the tiebreaker scenarios. What if like 5 teams just tied at 84 and 78? And it's just like,
if they all tie, there's no game 163.
Nope. It all comes down
to that anymore. Yeah.
Then it becomes like your NFL. There's a bunch of teams at 8-8, and if this person wins on a Tuesday and this person then if it's 78 degrees, then that team gets the tiebreaker. Like, who knows? It could get wild, as you said. Wild is the perfect way to describe the race.
Ryan, you've got one final pick for teams that are going to be aggressive, and Yuki in our chat said the Texas Rangers should be aggressive at the deadline to try and repeat. Try and even just get back to the World Series, something we haven't seen since the Kansas City Royals in 2014 and 2015, not 2016. Who thought that they went to the World Series in 2016 ever? Don't be ridiculous. So, Ryan, my question to you is, do you agree with Yuki? Are you going another way for a team that's going to be aggressive at the July 30 trade deadline?
Yuki's got me pegged. I would love to. I mean, I want to imagine that really is Yuki Matsui, and he's just like on a trainer's table somewhere right now, with his phone out watching us and is saying, "Hey, I'm new to the States here. That Rangers team that won the World Series, they going to be in?" I was torn between some teams because we've even talked about the Rangers and the Astros. Who are you buying into? The Rangers this weekend swept the Royals, like you said there, and they got Max Scherzer back. And Scherzer looked pretty good. And it just makes you imagine, okay, like if you hang in there, you get Tyler Mahle back. You hang in there, could Jacob deGrom be pitching in a postseason run? It all could work out for them. And now I think the bigger thing, more than even the pitchers, is you're seeing Wyatt Langford start to look like the guy we thought he was going to be, start to figure it out. And we've seen other guys have rough first halves as rookies, like Gunnar Henderson last year really, it was sort of, he's kind of hanging in the race to, oh yeah, he's the clear guy. If Langford's going to be a star in this game, he can really help drive things. They have so many guys that could just come together to see, like, is Adolis Garcia ever going to get it going? They have Seager and Simeon. There's just so many pieces there that I think I'm buying into the Rangers a little bit more than the Astros right now. So to me, Texas Rangers are a team that we got to watch ahead of this deadline. I also think that if they wanted to, if they fell out of it, they could go the other way, and trade off some pitching, because they have some guys that could be free agents that you could deal. But I think they're going to be all the way in on this season.
We talked about this a little bit when we were comparing the Astros and Rangers in that AL West to figure out who's going to be the one there. And you got the Rangers, I got the Astros. But one of the reasons why it does seem like the Rangers could be a little bit more aggressive than taking the opposite route or even standing pat is the fact that they are hosting the All-Star game this year. And teams, they just won the World Series as well. So you got Bruce Bochy, who just won the World Series and is managing the AL team in his home ballpark. I don't know if that's ever happened before. We'll have to ask our guy, Clay Snowden, about that one. He loves the history and things of that nature. But they want to give back to those fans. And I think they could have an easier way to do that because, as you pointed out, they're getting so many arms back. And the pitching has actually been pretty decent for the season. They got a 4.01 ERA, 10th best ERA over the last month for all pitchers. And it's really been the offense, I think, that's been slipping. Wyatt Langford's heating up. Adolis Garcia is going to be a little bit better here. And so I think they just need to focus on adding a bat or two if they see fit. So I think that makes the math a little bit easier to target just that one area versus grabbing a bunch of different pieces here and there. And now's their opportunity, because who knows what happens when Bruce Bochy is gone? Who knows who the next guy is coming in? And Seager and Simeon are, they're already on the wrong side of 30. So there's that element to it, and say, we really should go after this right now, despite the fact that Wyatt Langford is just getting his career started. To use an NFL analogy, Dan Marino was in the Super Bowl his first year, never got a sniff of it ever again. So you got to make the most of those opportunities. And as we said with our conversation a week or so ago, make sure you're checking that out over on YouTube. One team, every move that they make could very well block the other when it comes to the Rangers and Astros. And so we've seen Chris Young be aggressive before. I very much think that this is a good pick for you, Ryan, for the Rangers to be aggressive again in that AL West.
You talk about getting some bats into the fold. Josh Jung is right around the corner, and they have Josh H. Smith, who has been the best hitter on the team this year out of nowhere, and he can be more of a super utility guy. You can move him around a little bit. There's just a great lineup that is on the precipice of being realized, and that's what they need to really get into this race. And we're starting to see some of the signs of it. To see them, put up some runs in a hurry in a couple of these games, but we need to see it all come together. And, I think you have a couple of prideful organizations in the Rangers who, why wouldn't you be prideful? You just won the World Series, and the Astros, who have been that, the dynasty. So with them both being in a similar position, you do wonder, how do they motivate each other at the trade deadline? Even I felt like last year, the Rangers trade for Scherzer, and right around the corner, the Astros say, okay, we'll one-up you. We'll get Justin Verlander. Could we see something like that again, where one of the teams moves and the other one follows? And in which case, are they going to be dealing a lot of prospect capital and being uber aggressive? They're fun. They're fun teams to watch right now, because they have incredible potential.
As you pointed out, the Mets trading Max Scherzer to the Rangers. They trade Justin Verlander to the Astros. My question to you is, who gets JD Martinez and who gets Starling Marte?
I don't think anyone. I think, if you want to lightly use Jeff McNeil for a change of scenery, I mean, I'm all ears. I think that, JD Martinez being dealt is an interesting one, because I don't know how much you get for a guy that didn't have a market in free agency. Like, the markets generally align. If you have a guy that wasn't able to secure that deal, how many teams are giving you the prospect for the 36-year-old DH only? I don't know. So he would be one of the best bats dangled. That's why the Mets, getting back to them, are so interesting, because they could service so many teams' needs if they wanted to. Who needs a starting center fielder who's having a pretty nice year in Harrison Bader? Who needs Starling Marte, like you said, a guy that's having a good offensive season? You can eat down the contract, make it attractive. They got a lot that they could deal. So That's where some of these teams are exciting, just like the Astros. If they finally decided for the first time in a long time to sell, Bregman is a big name who's starting to hit that could be moved to some teams. So it's a race right now that is so wide open, and that's what makes baseball so much fun as we get closer and closer to the deadline. We'll be covering it all here with Who's Better Baseball. Make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. Check out our YouTube channel. We will break up these conversations into smaller videos. You can find us on social media at Who's Better BB. Anything else you got to add, Patrick?
No, this is just an exciting time. It's time for baseball to own the summer, and whatever happens in the next week or two, it's all going to impact everything in the trade deadline. So I can't wait. This is an exciting time.
It is for sure. So we'll be back with another show later this week.